The rain fell hard over downtown Cleveland, Ohio, turning the sidewalks into mirrors of gray sky and tired faces, when a thin, poorly dressed man stepped through the glass doors of a towering corporate building. His coat was frayed at the cuffs, his shoes worn thin from years of walking instead of driving, and his posture carried the quiet weight of someone who had learned to endure without complaining. What no one inside that building knew was that this man, silently wiping rain from his face, was the very person whose name sat engraved on the company's founding plaque in the lobby. They saw poverty, they saw weakness, they never imagined they were looking at the CEO. If you believe stories like this remind us that kindness still matters in a harsh world, take a moment right now to like the video, share it with someone who needs hope, leave a comment, and subscribe to the channel for more stories about second chances and hidden truth. The man's name was Jonathan Hale, and years ago, he had built Hale Dynamics from nothing more than an idea, a second-hand laptop, and the stubborn faith his late mother had raised him with. He had slept on couches, skipped meals, and prayed alone in empty rooms while chasing a dream no investor wanted to touch. Slowly, painfully, the company grew. Contracts came in. Offices expanded, people were hired, and one day, Hale Dynamics became a name that commanded respect across the Midwest. But success had come at a cost Jonathan never expected. As the company grew larger, he grew lonelier. Board members argued numbers, executives chased bonuses, and somewhere along the way, compassion faded from the culture he once held sacred. So Jonathan did something radical. He stepped away from his visible role, let the board believe he was recovering from illness overseas, and returned quietly to see his company as the powerless saw it. That rainy morning, Jonathan walked in as nothing more than a poor man asking for work. The lobby smelled of polished marble and expensive cologne. Employees moved quickly, eyes fixed on screens and schedules, brushing past him as though he were invisible. His presence seemed to irritate the air. Security glanced at him with suspicion. A few staff members exchanged looks that mixed amusement and annoyance. To them, he did not belong. He felt it in the way shoulders turned away, in the way voices lowered when he passed, in the silent judgment that weighed heavier than the rain-soaked coat on his back. Jonathan approached the reception area slowly, hands folded, heart steady but heavy. He remembered when he used to greet every employee by name, when he had promised himself that no one at Hale Dynamics would ever feel small. Now he stood there, living proof that the promise had been broken. The receptionist barely looked up, her eyes flicking over him before returning to her screen. Her expression hardened. She gestured dismissively toward a bench near the door, the one meant for delivery drivers and temporary laborers. Jonathan sat there waiting, listening, absorbing. Minutes stretched into nearly an hour. People passed. Laughter echoed from a nearby conference room where catered breakfasts were being served. Jonathan's stomach tightened, not from hunger alone, but from memory. He remembered being that man outside the glass, hoping someone inside would just listen. Finally, a mid-level manager noticed him and waved security over. The humiliation that followed burned quietly. Jonathan was questioned, searched with cold eyes, and told that the building was no place for someone like him. The words were not spoken with cruelty alone, but with something worse, indifference. As he sat back on the bench afterward, cheeks flushed, hands trembling slightly, Jonathan wondered how many others had walked in like this and walked out broken. He thought of his mother, Margaret Hale, who used to say that a man's true wealth was measured by how he treated those who could offer him nothing. Tears stung his eyes, but he blinked them away. This was why he had come. This pain mattered. In the following days, Jonathan returned again and again, each time in a different disguise of poverty. Sometimes he wore a faded hoodie, sometimes he carried a worn folder filled with blank papers, pretending it held a resume. Each visit revealed the same pattern. Employees spoke sharply. Managers dismissed him without listening. Interns learned quickly from those above them that kindness was inefficient. Only one person ever offered him a cup of water or a seat without judgment, a quiet maintenance worker named Samuel Brooks, whose own life had been shaped by hardship and faith. That small mercy stayed with Jonathan, glowing like a candle in the dark. Behind the scenes, the company was struggling. Profits were slipping, morale was low, and turnover was climbing. The board blamed the market, the economy, anything but themselves. Jonathan watched it all from the shadows, attending meetings through recordings, reading reports late at night from a small rented room. He felt the weight of responsibility pressing down on him. This was his creation. This was his failure to protect its soul. The turning point came during a major company-wide meeting announced with great urgency. Employees filled the auditorium, buzzing with rumors of layoffs and restructuring. Anxiety hung thick in the air. Jonathan entered through a side door, still dressed as the poor man they had grown used to ignoring. A few employees rolled their eyes, others laughed quietly. Security moved toward him, ready to escort him out yet again, but before they could reach him, the massive screen behind the stage flickered to life. What followed stunned the room into silence. The screen displayed old photographs, a younger Jonathan in a cramped apartment, Jonathan shaking hands with the company's first employee, Jonathan standing beside the original office sign. Confusion spread, then realization hit like thunder. Jonathan walked slowly to the center of the stage, rain-soaked coat still on his shoulders, eyes steady, face calm. The room froze as understanding settled in. He did not raise his voice. He did not accuse or shame. Instead, he spoke of values, of beginnings, of faith and dignity. He spoke of how easily success can blind good people, how power can erase empathy if left unchecked. He spoke of the poor man at the door and asked who among them had seen him as human. The silence that followed was heavy with regret. Faces fell. Some employees bowed their heads. Others wiped away tears. Jonathan announced changes that day, not just in leadership, but in culture. Training programs were rebuilt around empathy. Managers were held accountable not only for numbers, but for how their teams felt. Wages were adjusted. Support programs were created for struggling employees. And the maintenance worker, Samuel Brooks, was publicly thanked and promoted into a role that recognized his integrity. In the weeks that followed, Hale dynamics transformed. Smiles returned to the halls. Turnover slowed. Productivity rose not from fear, but from trust. Jonathan returned to his office, not as a distant executive, but as a present leader. He walked the floors daily, listening, remembering names, restoring what had been lost. If this story is touching your heart right now, if it reminds you of a time you felt unseen or judged, please take a moment near the end of this video to like, share, and comment. Your engagement helps these messages reach others who may need them more than you know. And before this story ends, here is a special request. Comment below about a moment when kindness changed your life, or when you chose compassion instead of judgment. Jonathan Hale never forgot the rain on his coat or the bench near the door. He kept the worn shoes in his office as a reminder of where he had been and who he served. And long after profits recovered and headlines faded, what mattered most was that a company remembered its humanity. Sometimes the poorest man in the room carries the richest lesson of all.